Welcome to our webinar on maximizing portfolio value, the strategic importance of effective resource capacity planning. If you enjoy this topic, please explore our YouTube channel for more videos and follow us on LinkedIn to be in the know for event announcements and speaking engagements.
What is OnePlan? OnePlan is both a software and a consulting company, although we are primarily a software company. We are a global leader in project and portfolio management, recognized across the board. Any questions about those kinds of credentials or how long we've been in business, I'm happy to answer, but OnePlan has been around for more than 10 years and we have hundreds of clients. I always like to start out a discussion about resource capacity planning and the importance of it by comparing it to donuts. It's not a frivolous parallel. In fact, there are so many good parallels. It's kind of almost embarrassing that we could compare a human being to a donut. But if you think about it, your average donut shop every day has to have a certain number of donuts under the counter. And at the end of every day, ideally, they have maybe 1 or 2 donuts left, showing that they are as close as possible to having used or sold every possible donut that they have. And donuts obviously come in different varieties. And you can see that the parallels with people and hours, how easily the parallel is drawn. People come in different varieties, different skills, and at the end of every day, you hope that you have used every hour available and you don't have any extra hours, but also you haven't run short on any hours based on the things that you should do. And again, if you think about it as a donut shop, if you end every day with too many donuts under the counter, you're losing money. The same goes for the idea that if you end every day with 0 donuts under the counter, you don't even have any idea how many donuts you could have sold. People and hours are no different. You are attempting to ensure that you have exactly, which you will never get to, exactly the right number of hours for all the work that you need to get done that will return or show a return to the company. Today we have Excel used by many. There's really no surprise in this. The problems with Excel are kind of known to people. They're actually some of the same strengths that Excel has. The lack of standards on the one hand is great. You can do whatever you want. On the other hand, it's a problem. You can do whatever you want. These things kind of tend to need to be passed around by email. It's easy to break the formulas and the calculations. You're not really working from a unified resource pool. Governance is difficult, and strategic alignment of projects is also ends up being difficult. You see a lot of these same problems occurring with Smartsheet, by the way. It's not just a problem with Excel. But across the board, you get done minimally what you need to get done, which is assigning people to tasks and projects. But as your organization expands, your demands become more precise, or your demand for precision rises, you find it more and more difficult to actually get what you need to out of the spreadsheets. The notion of resource capacity planning applies across the agile transformation spectrum. And you may or may not be working in an agile environment. It's kind of irrelevant. Agile is certainly the hot topic of the day. But across the board with project and portfolio management, adaptive portfolio management, or agile portfolio management, there are mechanisms for determining what people work on, but there's less focus on making sure that your resources are actually correct. That is, that you have enough and exactly the donuts you need to sell during the day, and of exactly the type that you need to sell. Part of the reason for this is that these systems are scattered all over the place. Again, I don't think this is probably any surprise to anybody on this call, but each different role in an organization has its own interests and goals. The hope is, of course, that at the top they unify and serve the best purposes of the organization. But along the way, a lot of this data gets chopped up and siloed, and especially when it comes to making the most of resources who should be moving from the most advantageous work from the least advantageous work to the most advantageous work. The silos and the disparate goals of the roles often interfere with making sure that you're getting the most out of resources. There's a definite distinction when we talk about resources between internal work and external work. And your organization could take either of these two forms or a blend of the two. Across our client base, we see that full range. Internal projects tend to be strategic, focusing on business objectives, and we will talk about strategic drivers and OKRs. It tends to deal with portfolio optimization and things like change management. External tends to be far more operational, focused on efficiency and optimization of service delivery or a product. It tends to focus much more closely on resource utilization or resource chargeability, right? If you're doing external work, you're charging for the resource's time. And you, again, focus on things like timesheets and profitability and billing and invoicing and chargebacks. Again, your organization could have a blend of both. In either case, you probably have a resource pool, and it is probably a heterogeneous resource pool with many different skill sets and talents inside it that could be used either on internal or external projects. The key point here is when we talk about implementing the system, that we implement the right features that correspond with where you think your greatest return in your organization will be, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a later slide. In OnePlan, there are three primary types of resource planning, and probably in general across most systems. In OnePlan, I will say one of the big virtues is that we have three first-class mechanisms for planning these things, and by first class, I mean in most of our competitors' products, there's one system of record or one system of planning that the others must be subordinated to. OnePlan does not force you to make that choice. We offer a unified environment where you can follow the processes and the requirements of each planning mechanism and then contrast the results of those and hopefully, ideally, optimize either your project throughput or your revenue stream. So the three, scheduling, including both Agile and Waterfall, this is typically what people think of as a project plan or a project schedule. It's a work breakdown structure with tasks and dependencies, very familiar to most people through a Gantt chart. Resource capacity planning, which instead of taking a project-centric or a work breakdown structure-centric view of the world, starts with a list of resources that then need to be assigned to projects, reversing, in fact, the mechanism of planning. So when you're working with a project, you create your WBS, you lay out your tasks, and then you put resources on the tasks. In resource capacity planning, yes, you've created a project in advance, but you haven't done a bunch of task planning, and you're starting out with a list of resources and then applying them to projects. And the last is financial. This is probably the easiest and the quickest of the three. This is where you kind of work according to budgeting and cost categories in order to maximize your resource usage. So if you think about it, item number one, scheduling is probably the most specialized, the most labor intensive, and it provides you with the most fine-grained control over future outcomes. Resource capacity planning, on the other hand, is quite a bit more straightforward. You don't have to deal with all the tasks underneath the schedule anymore, and you're just concerned about what people are working on in the next month or two. And then finally, but you have less control, and number two, over what the actual outcome dates are and less predictability. And number three is the easiest of them all. You are not even working with named resources. You're just working with resource work types and categories, and you're able to look at things in terms of budgeting. Justifying the investment is usually a very important piece of this that people tend to forget. They tend to come to us as prospects saying, we have this problem, we don't know what people are working on, we don't know what people could be working on, we don't know what people are working on the right things, we can't respond quickly. We often get it takes too much time to create and maintain plans that end up being wrong. Or lastly, our stakeholders, despite our best effort, are consistently dissatisfied. These are all excellent ways to justify making an investment in a planning system like OnePlan. However, you're in far better shape if to some extent you can convert any of these things into a quantifiable investment and return. Not that that's necessarily going to win any arguments, but underneath this, it makes your case much harder to simply ignore. If you're doing external chargeability, if you're trying to maximize resource chargeability, for example, this becomes very straightforward. It's easy to say, well, we're going to raise our resource chargeability from 65% to 75%, and that will completely pay for this system in the first year, and for the next 5 years, it'll pay for it over and over. It gets to be a little bit trickier when we're trying to quantify. We don't know that people are working on the right things. However, in the event that there is any data available about what people are working on, whether it's particularly reliable or not, you could go through and assess if we applied strategic drivers, let's say based on leveraging OnePlan for that process, and we look at the project work and we say, wow, as it turns out, we're only doing 30% of the work on what our organization is wanting us to do. And the other 70% is this stuff that we, think has to be done, but we really can't identify. Suddenly you have, certainly if you have a blended rate inside your company, you have a quantifiable measure. That is, we have 70% of work that is just stuff that we want to shift over into the strategic objectives. And that will typically, again, carry a blended rate. Say it's $100 an hour for internal chargeback. You can calculate a return on that to the organization. And the happy outcome is your stakeholders will have better communication and are likely to shift from being dissatisfied into satisfied. Anyway, this slide, if anybody would ever like to circle back and talk about this, OnePlan and our consultants are very happy to work with you to help you justify this kind of investment. And again, the goal being not to necessarily seal the case up and make it, irrefutable, but it is to put a quantifiable justification underneath the ask to invest in a new system. OnePlan itself, how do we go about doing this? How do we connect strategy to execution, as it were? Again, keeping in mind in terms of this particular webinar, we are focused on making the most of resources, but internally, without having this connection between strategy and execution, we really can't make the most of our resources. We're going to talk about and demo some of this. The demo will not be in depth. Again, I'm going to say any topic that I bring up that you'd like to go into in more depth, I'm happy to do so personally. Also, anything I show that you are wondering about and you want to test yourself, we will kind of repeat. We offer a free trial to most people. So, for a week, which means anything that I say, you can put your hands on it and validate. OnePlan is not in the business of displacing systems that currently work. We are in the business of aggregating information for the purposes of planning, and consequently, we offer integrations and field mapping across a large list of out-of-the-box products. A lot of what we'll see kind of in the demo may cause you to wonder, well, where did the list of resources come from? Where did this list of projects come from? For example, we create all of our projects in SharePoint, and we want to move these in. All of that stuff is possible and in a dynamic fashion. Same thing goes for CRM and any other system that you may want to work with. We are going to demonstrate strategic portfolio management and OKRs, so I'm not going to dwell on this, but the gist is to use the OKR framework to organize your work in a way to ensure that people are doing the right work and you're making the most of your resources. Spend a little bit more time on visualizing resource capacity planning within projects. This is our ability to assign resources to tasks inside a scheduled project, but also represented as a simple capacity piece. Capacity planning organization-wide. This is resource-centric, and again, we'll talk about this demo a little bit. We of course support generic resources and roles, and our ability to kind of heat map out who's working, who has availability, and who isn't. or who doesn't. Talk a little bit about strategic portfolio analysis. This again will leverage the concept of projects, both coupled with resources, to ensure that you're actually working on things the organization wants you to work on, that your stakeholders will thank you for, as opposed to working on effort that may in fact be important, but your stakeholders aren't even aware of or don't value. Lastly, the financial planning piece, the easiest of the three, based on cost categories. All these things, again, I want to say can be leveraged in parallel. They can be used for different time frames. The goal, of course, being to ensure that you have adequate capacity to work on the work that you're taking and to make sure that people are working on the things that they should. And then finally, a little bit about dashboarding and analytics. We provide a huge list of dashboards for making these kinds of resource capacity decisions. All right, I'm going to switch into demonstration. We're going to do this demo probably for about 10 minutes. I will fly through a lot of topics. A OnePlan demo from start to finish with its whole feature set could probably take north of 4 hours. I'm going to stay focused on those things that are related to resource capacity planning. And again, if I raise anything or if I talk about something and you wish that I drill down further, please feel free to circle back and schedule a meeting. This is OnePlan. Down the left-hand side, basic navigation. Most of what you will see is configurable in OnePlan. We do, and I will circle back and kind of talk about this. We offer a list of starting templates, so you don't even need to do any configuration at all if you know what you're hoping for. But otherwise, you are able to configure OnePlan to do basically what you want it to do based on role. So even though for this demo we have all these options available, somebody who's only entering time, for example, would just see their timesheet demo, and that'd be the only thing they would see. So they'd have a very simplified version. I'm not going to dwell on too many things that I could in a longer discussion. There's a lot that I could explain, and I'm going to try to stay at an effective level for this purpose. So objectives, obviously your organization can list its objectives, and I then am able to say, okay, well, I want to take a look at this objective itself, and I want to see visually how this objective plays out across key results and projects and products. All of that's great and good. It really has very little to do right off the cuff with resource capacity planning, except insofar as you are able to make sure that you understand exactly which project you have opened and what is working and how it relates back to which objective. Again, this environment would be in an environment where the projects are mostly internal. What we see in these environments is that demand for work wildly exceeds the ability of the organization to deliver. You could think about an IT organization that can never seem to take on, 100% of the projects, more like 5% of the projects that it could do. What we see with an externally facing organization where you have chargeable resources is that usually if you actually have additional work to do, you're not actually trying to pick which project to work on. You have to work on it. You're having to try to determine whether or not you want to do hiring. So this in particular is focused on internal facing projects and making sure that only the projects that your resources should be working on are the ones that they are working on, and they're tied back to key objectives that people can see. Across the top, you can see that we have details about the objectives as well. A work plan for the objective. I'm not going to emphasize this at this point, but you will see in OnePlan over and over that each entity you have can have its own little project schedule that you can assign resources to, and what those resources are assigned to then appear as demand in the larger resource pool. I wanted to go ahead and take a look at the key results associated with this particular objective, and I can see that these are the key results that I want, and I can drill down further into the project itself, and from there I might in fact choose to take a look at the work plan. I will go ahead and open this. The work plan at this point should be basically what everybody normally thinks of as a work plan. Let's see the Gantt chart. Yes, work breakdown structure, task dependencies across a basic WBS, resources assigned to those things. Now, where it becomes more interesting is if I take this and I say I want to look at, where is it specifically? I want to look at the resource plan associated with this project. And underneath, in terms of this project, I can see that I have resources and what they're working on. Now, this will also show demand from across projects, depending on what else these people are assigned to. But this puts the project manager in a position where they are able to more aggressively and interactively optimize the resources on their projects. Across the side, you can see that we have a basic heat map showing who's under and who's over capacity already. We are able to use hours, percentages, and FTE. We're able to add people from across the resource pool, depending on various criteria, if that's what we want to do. Oh, I don't want to do that because that's not going to be ready for the demo. All right, I'll leave that alone. And I'm able to take a resource-centric view for this particular project. So again, in an environment where I had, for example, maybe ownership of a resource team and I wanted to work within this project, I would be able to take advantage of that and make sure that the resources were optimized for this particular project. Moving on, let's suppose that in fact, I want to work with this from a resource-centric view of the world. So down this side, you see a list of all resources across the system. We do allow for filtering and grouping. So if you are working with hundreds or thousands of resources, your scalability will be preserved. But the short of this is that we are able to, instead of simply working with individual projects, I'm able to assign resources at the top line, again, based on FTEs or hours, depending on, or percentage, depending on what made sense. And I'm able to optimize the resource pool for resource chargeability or utilization. Now, the interesting piece of this, you may be thinking, is, oh, well, how do I actually look at this compared to what the resource manager or what the project manager thinks is on the schedule? So I'm able to add scheduled and committed time, in which case what we're talking about with the resource planner, and I'm able to contrast those two and color code the contrast between the two. So this is a huge leap forward in terms of most organizations, in terms of what they can see and what they can do. Certainly from a spreadsheet perspective or an individual project schedule perspective. So I want to pause on this for just 1 second and highlight what is happening here. So each one of these resources can be assigned to projects, and they can be assigned by multiple people to projects. And we of course have a workflow that you could go through for approvals if that's what you need to do. But everybody's planning is automatically grouped in one spot. So you're out of the business of having to hoover up spreadsheets or whatever else and somehow integrate them through formulas. People are able to work and plan just exactly for what they want Daniel Williams to be working on, for example, and they're able to do it in whatever time frame they want, weeks, months, quarters, whatever makes the most sense. Not only that, again, as long as we are publishing to OnePlan, they are able to contrast what they think their resource is. So I'm Daniel Williams' boss, and this is what I think Daniel Williams is going to be working on. I'm able to compare it to what the project scheduler thinks that Daniel Williams is going to be working on, putting me in a position to actually pick up the phone and call the project manager and say, I see you've assigned Daniel to this. That's not what I was thinking was going to happen. What do you think is going to happen? And then consequently optimize that. Now, what that means is, in the case of internally facing projects, you are able to, between the resource owner or the resources manager and the project manager, have a value-added discussion about which of these projects these resources should be on based on the OKRs that we went over, for example, to begin with. If you're an externally facing organization, typically what we see is, again, the same thing. We have an engagement manager or an engagement project manager making a schedule of deliverables. And at the same time, there's a resource capacity planner who cares about chargeability, looking at these two plans and saying, wow, well, yes, that's a very nice project schedule you have, but I need to make sure these people are kept busy or we're going to lose them, or I need to make sure these people aren't too busy or we're going to lose them. So you get a tremendous amount of lift out of this particular view in terms of making sure that your resources are doing what they should do, is really the point that I want to make. And it's very, very difficult to get here unless you have an integrated system actually built to do exactly this. So I'm going to pop up to the portfolio level at this point, and I'm going to open all these up. And just very quickly, I'm going to drill into this particular project, Work Planner, and I'm going to look at the financial plan just for the sake of demonstration. And this is a budget-centric view of the world. You can see down the side, we have these things called cost categories, all completely configurable. Under labor, we could have a various set of roles. We are able to kind of do the exact same thing. We're able to do comparisons between forecast and budget, forecast and schedule, forecast and actuals. This is the absolute easiest and quickest way to go about doing any kind of planning for anything. This can be done at multiple levels, the project level, the portfolio level, up and down the line. And it can be contrasted and rolled up and rolled down with your schedules or your resource capacity plan, or both, depending on how you want to approach this. And you can, and the upshot being, you have a very effective and rapid way to do longer range planning. And you can contrast that longer range planning with the more detailed planning for resource capacity or for the project schedule. In all three cases, you are in a position where you can optimize for the resource capacity and making sure that they are doing the right things at the right time, and that you're emphasizing that kind of throughput. Lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the modeler. I won't go into this in too much depth. The modeler, let's back up a second and just walk into it. The modeler presents a series of models underneath which, and each model has its own set of restrictions or its purpose. Strategic planning in this case, capability planning, IT project planning. Under each of the models, there are multiple scenarios. So I'm going to head and go open up the strategic planning model. And you can see there are a couple of pre-built scenarios here: strategic objective 1, strategic objective 2. Again, whatever it is that you wanted to take as your set of assumptions for which efforts you might be working on or not working on. Underneath, and this is where it starts to get interesting, again, we're presented with the ability to look at resources based on capacity, and we're able to click and select and choose projects that are in. Let me go ahead and apply one of these scenarios. We have some projects that are deselected for this particular scenario, some projects that are selected. And by deselected, I mean you have chosen to deselect them. These are in priority order. You can set up whatever prioritization order you want, but you are choosing to move them in or out of this scenario. It's not done automatically or mysteriously. And once you've done that, you're able to optimize for your resource capacity underneath here. So within the modeler, you're working with actual information in the system. It is production data in the system. You're not having to go get it from anywhere or mock anything up. But once you are in the model and you're working on a scenario, you're free to do whatever you want. You won't impact that external data. And what this brings to the table, especially versus Excel or any of the other kind of more individual tools, is let's suppose that you're asked, I need to know what my hiring model looks like for 6 months from now. And I need it, of course, based on all the information that I already have, and I need to be able to throw in these assumptions. Instead of scrambling across multiple people and multiple phone calls, maybe taking weeks to get to this, you're able to pull together a good, better, and best set of models in the matter of a couple hours at the outside. And suddenly you look like a hero for having kind of pulled all this together, and you're able to do it all without impacting the actual system data. So one last thing, just very quickly, in terms of looking at this, if I wanted to come in and I wanted to say, show me what the impact is between these two scenarios, and give me a comparison, I'm able to see which ones are in, which ones are out, what the priority lists are. I'm able to kind of customize this as well, depending on what you want to do, but I'm able to kind of see at a glance what the difference is between two objectives or two different scenarios. Again, putting me in a position where I can ensure that I'm able to talk meaningfully about what resources we should hire or what projects we can do based on the resource that we have in a data-driven and easily and quickly summarizable way. Again, I want to kind of emphasize anything that I've glossed over quickly in terms of this demo, I'm happy to expand on. Anything that you want to put your hands on in terms of a trial, you would absolutely be welcome and encouraged to do so. All right, that ends our demonstration. The summary and next steps. So what you saw over the course of this were three planning mechanisms for ensuring that resources are working towards whatever the enterprise goals are as effectively as possible. Each one, a work plan based approach, a resource capacity planning based approach, or a financials based approach, has its pluses and its minuses. Each one operates at a different level of detail and has its own processes. And each one, if you choose to use all three, can be compared to the others, again, kind of facilitating the discussion in the organization that will lead to optimizing results. Free trials. If you choose to go to OnePlan.ai solutions and try to put your hands on some of what I discussed, which I encourage, you'll be presented with some options. These are templates. Once you apply a template, the template can be modified either in detail, or you can back it out and start with a new template. The goal is to start with a system that actually has some dummy data in it and some dummy configuration, so that you can kind of test through what I've said. But in each case, it's a very quick process, and you are certainly not starting from scratch. Thank you. This has been a Tuesday before Thanksgiving webinar. I'm grateful you were here for this. And please, again, if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.